Hello, this is Mike Dell from Blueberry Podcasting, and today we're going to set up PowerPress. So this video is if you're brand spanking new to Blueberry Podcasting and using PowerPress. If you're using a PowerPress site or a WordPress site that is hosted at Blueberry, PowerPress is already installed. Otherwise, you need to install it. So you log into your WordPress site, go to the back end, to the dashboard, and you go to plugins. Now I already have it installed because we're working with a beta here because of the new version of PowerPress. But you would hit add new, and then you would type in PowerPress and search for it. And it would be the first one that comes up here. You would click install instead of activate, and then you would click activate. But since I already have it installed, I'm just going to activate it here. And when you first install it on a website, you're going to come to a menu that looks more like this one, Getting Started. And this helps you get started. It doesn't quite get everything yet. So it says, okay, have you started your podcast? And if you're brand new, no, you haven't. So hit no. And we'll bring you to this screen. Now, the podcast title. This is the title of your show that's going to show up in all of the directories out there. You know, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, TuneIn, all of them. So this is the name of your podcast. Now, my website's title is underwaterbasketweaving.net, but I don't want that to be my podcast title. I want it to be the Underwater Basket Weaving Podcast, or just Underwater Basket Weaving Podcast. Putting the in front of it generally isn't a great idea. Category. This is the category in Apple Podcasts. So you pull that down. You find one that is close because they're not perfect. And in this case, we're going to do education. Where was education? There we go. How to. Since I'm showing you how to set up PowerPress. And then we're going to work on getting the image in there. So make sure you have your 1400 by 1400 pixel image, or up to 3000 by 3000. But the key is it has to be exactly square, and it has to be between those pixel ranges. And it also has to be somewhere below 500 kilobytes. So that's why I always suggest that people use 1400 by 1400. Everybody's looking at that image at about 1 inch by 1 inch on a phone, so it doesn't need to be super high resolution. But anyway, you click the upload button and you go to your image. You'll see my great Photoshop there. And you click open, and there you go. It's in there, gives you a preview of it. If it's not within spec, it'll come up and give you an error saying what's wrong with it. If it's not square, or if it's too big or too small or whatever. So then hit continue. And then it says, would you like to host on Blueberry? Well, if you're not hosting on Blueberry, just click no thanks. If you are hosting with Blueberry, click host with Blueberry. And if and you already should have signed up for hosting at Blueberry. If not, go over there and sign up for it. Use the promo code HELPDESK for a free month. That's one word, HELPDESK. So I'm going to log into my blueberry.com account. Blueberry.com. This is the password that you use to log into Blueberry, not your password to log into your WordPress site. That does get a little confusing at times. Also, you notice I have LastPass here. Any of those password saving things, including the ones within the browser, will not work here, only because you're on your WordPress site and it wants to log into your WordPress site. That won't work here. So you use your blueberry.com login and your blueberry.com password. And you click sign in. And it says you're ready to go. Well, it's almost ready to go. Now I have more than one show on this account, so make sure if you do to select the show that you're talking about or that you're working on. And it says create a new episode. You could do that right now, but I suggest skip and go to settings. And then you get into here, and there's a few things that you need to also set up on top of what the Getting Started menu will do for you. So the first thing you want to do is go to the Feeds tab. And in this first section, Podcast Feeds, this is your podcast feed is right here. And that's what it's going to be. So whatever that is, that's the feed that you're going to give to everybody when you submit it to the different directories. I tend to want to leave Enhance All Feeds. You could go Do Not Enhance Feeds. That'll only apply to your podcast feeds, or Enhance Main Feed Only. Adds podcasting only to your main feed. Just leave it at the top one. Special Podcast Only feed, which is the same as this, actually. And the validate won't work because of this warning. You haven't had an episode yet. You have to have an episode before that feed is valid, but we haven't published one yet. So go down here. It says, do not allow other plugins to modify podcast feeds. Go ahead and check that. Accelerate feed. Go ahead and check that one as well. Faster is better. And feed discovery, if it's not checked, check it. That helps you with Google search and Google Podcasts. And RSS2 image. This one can be on or off. I tend to put it on, but if you get some trouble with the fave icon, you can uncheck that and it'll get rid of that problem. Hit Save Changes. Don't worry about emojis. You can use them if you want. Feed settings. This is very important, because your show title, and we already did this once, but for some reason it didn't stick. So let's copy again and paste in your show title the way you want it to be in everything. Feed description. You must have a feed description. It's a one-liner description of your feed. You really don't need to repeat the name of the podcast because this is a description, not a title. So paste in a little one-liner in there. Podcast Mirror feed URL. If you're not using Podcast Mirror, don't put anything in this box. Don't ever put anything in this box unless you're going to use Podcast Mirror and have that set up ahead of time. But don't worry about it. At this point, you don't need it. Show most recent. In WordPress, 10 episodes will show up in your RSS feed if you don't change this. The maximum is 300 that Apple will show and most other directories. So I tend to want to just put 300. And if you do anything more than 10, then you want to hit this maximize checkbox. And copyright, you can put in a copyright if you want. Just by the fact that you're making content, you are copyrighted in most English-speaking countries and several other countries. So put in your copyright there if you want to. The little copyright symbol, you can hit Alt and then and hold Alt and hit +069 on a Windows computer, or you can hit the Option key and G on an Apple computer to get the little C, or you can go copy and paste it from somewhere else on the internet and paste it in there. Caching debug comments. I would say leave that off. Basically, it allows super cache and W3 cache if you're using it to put HTML comments in your feed. That can cause trouble, so I would suggest leaving that off, but if you're debugging, maybe you might need that on, but don't worry about it. Hit Save Changes, and you'll get tired of me saying that because there's a lot of save changes because we're going to make a lot of changes. Podcast artwork. Now, you notice there's an image up here, but it didn't go down here. So you want to copy this image, link there, click Also Use as RSS image, and use this program Apple Podcast image above as the episodic image. Paste that in. Now you can put an episodic image in later. I'll explain that in other videos. And just hit Save Changes. And then it puts it in both places, and this is turned on. Podcast SEO, I suggest not doing anything here. You could turn on schema audio objects or video objects. If you're doing an audio podcast, you can do that one. If you're going to do a video one, do that one. It doesn't do a whole lot yet, but soon it may, so you can turn it on. It won't hurt a thing. Basic show information. Location is not really important, but if you want to throw it in there, you can. It's not required. And I happen to be in Traverse City, Michigan, which is the cherry capital of the world. Episode frequency. It's also optional. You do not have to put that in, but I do this approximately monthly. M-O-N, if I could spell. And let's see, I still didn't spell it right. Jeez. Anyway, I put that in there, but it, like I said, it's not required. Donate link. If you have a Patreon or a PayPal button or something, or buy me a coffee, you can put the URL to that there and a label like buy me a coffee, buy me a beer, donate to the show, whatever. Note that only shows up in certain apps. One I know of is Skipcast on iOS, which isn't used all that much, so may not get a lot of mileage out of that, but you can do it. Save changes. And then rating settings. In the United States, we have a thing called the VCHIP rule. To be on a directory or on a TV, such as Apple TV or Roku, Boxy, if they're still around, Google TV, anything that gets onto a TV screen should have a rating so that parents can decide whether they want their kids to watch it or not. Don't use anything less than TVG unless your show is specifically for kids. So, and then, pick the appropriate one. They're not super picky about this, but if you're dropping F-bombs all the time, TVG probably isn't the right one. And then save changes. And one of the more important ones is the Apple settings. There's some specific Apple settings in here that you want to make sure you put in. This subtitle and description or summary. You can use the exact same text that you put in the feed description, and if you want, you can even put it there, or you can have a little bit longer version of that if you want. Those three boxes, the one in the feed description, the subtitle, and the summary, do not show up in the same place at the same time, so you could safely put the same thing in all three. Wrap summary values with CData tags. I recommend leaving that off unless support tells you need to turn that on. Episode summary. Optimize iTunes summary from blog post. Well, it kind of does that automatically, so I would say leave that off. Author name. Very important. Before you submit to Apple, you have to have an author name. And Apple is picky about this. This needs to be a name or some names. It cannot be a descriptor. It cannot be the title of your show. Apple hates redundancy. Where that's going to show up on Apple specifically and most other apps is it's going to say the title of your podcast. So mine, Underwater Basket Weaving Podcast by, it'll say Mike Dell, because that's what I'm going to put here. If you put anything other than that in here or stuff keywords in there, Apple can remove you from their directory and will. Eventually, you might be able to get away with it for a while, but they will definitely take you out if you stuff keywords in there. And I know there's some advice out there on the internet that tells you to stuff that with keywords. Don't do it. Author email. This is an email address that you check. It cannot be, don't spam me at yahoo.com or whatever you use for junk mail. Don't do that. You want it to be an email address that you actually check. And since I get paid to check this one, I will put that one in there. But it has to be an email you check, because if it isn't, Apple will not like you and nobody else will like you. Explicit tag. This is going to come up with no option selected. Go ahead and select clean or explicit. Whatever, fits the thing. Be honest about it, because if someone complains, you can get taken out of Apple. Feed type. No option selected is a good selection, so leave that alone. You could switch it to episodic because that's kind of the default. Don't switch it to serial. Serial is a very specific use case, and it only works on Apple anyway, so leave it at episodic or no option selected. The new feed URL. Do not use this unless you're moving. So please leave that alone. Same thing with these advanced options. This is for if you are going to quit podcasting. And it is permanent. Once you have selected this and Apple pulls your feed, you will no longer be updated in the Apple directory, or you will no longer be in the Apple directory, and there's no way to reverse that. So don't mess with these settings. Hit Save Changes. And that is the feeds area. The website tab, this shows you, this is how the player shows up within the post. And basically this first screen, there's not much to do here. Make sure you've got it on because you want it on. That's default. Default WordPress behavior is good. This is in case you have a page already that is /podcast or a category called podcast, which I highly discourage. The word podcast is a very lousy SEO term, and it can conflict with your RSS feed. But if you already have a page that says podcast, or you already have a category called podcast, then switch this to match feed name to page or category, and that'll help it not conflict. But otherwise, you can leave this whole section alone. Blog posts and pages. By default, it comes up as below page content. I kind of like it above. I want the player at the top of my blog post so that it's right in their face. I'm posting a podcast, so I don't have the player right there. Player settings here. It says display player and links in WordPress excerpts. That's if you have a theme that does excerpts, which, if you have a read more link or whatever, you can choose to have the player actually show up in the excerpt page. I don't have a theme with excerpts, so I leave that off. Hide player links. This is one of the many ways you can get it to not show the player, so leave that off. Display player, leave that on. Media links. Display play and new window link and display download link. Those are on by default. I highly recommend leaving those on. The play a new window link's kind of cool. Somebody gets on your post and they click play a new window. It opens up a small little window and starts playing your show, and they can navigate around your site just fine. Display download link, self-explanatory. It's a download. I also like to click this include file size and duration. That way they know what they're in for. There's people out there that are on limited cell phone plans or, limited data plans, or they have limited time. So it's really nice to let them know what they're in for if they hit play. Display player embed link. This is if you want your users to be able to embed your show into their web page. This does not work for social media, unfortunately, because Facebook and Twitter and all the rest hate audio, it seems. So this embed link will not work in social media. This is, strictly if someone wants to put it on a page, you can turn that on and it gives them that option. Display links under player. This is the subscribe links, which I'll show you how to set up later. And you can put a label here, instead of, just subscribe, it'll say something else. So you can have that, in your own language or whatever you want to do. Hit save changes and subscribe page. This is a page that we can create for you from a template. So you click that, create subscribe page from template. It makes a page in your WordPress pages over here, wherever it is, pages, called subscribe to podcast. And I'll show you that here in a little bit. And you can also have the page link label. Right now it'll say more or something like that, or more options. You could type in there subscribe page or whatever you want to call it. And I'll show you that again when I show you the actual player on a page and the subscribe page. Subscribe widget. That's a sidebar widget that you can add called Subscribe to Podcast, and it has all the different places your show is available when it's available. And you can shape the player to, squared or rounded. You can use the recommended styling, or you can exclude recommended styling. I don't know exactly what that does. It's from CSS. If you know CSS, then you're a better person than I am. But you see, if I hit rounded, this is what an example of what the button in the subscribe widget looks like. And squared, same thing. Just squared off. And there is actually a classic styling, which is, more of a solid color, and you can also have that rounded as well. So kind of cool. I kind of like the new modern one and squared. But anyway, once you've got that figured out, hit Save Changes. PowerPress Shortcode. This is just informational. Basically, it tells you, the different codes you can use. If you want to move that player around, even if you have it set to above, you can actually put this shortcode in your blog post where you want the player to show up, and it'll show up there instead of the top of the post. PowerPress Playlist Player, there's another place to enable that. So, you can turn it on if you want. It's kind of cool. But if you put that shortcode in, it'll by default, it'll do 10 episodes of your show in reverse order so that people can just listen in a playlist. Subscribe shortcode. This is what we put on the subscribe page, and it makes a box with all the subscribe links in it. You can put that anywhere on your page that you want. It does not work on other pages, just within your own. And there's also a skip to position player shortcode. So within your post, you could have links that skip to a certain place in the player. Personally, I don't know why you'd want to do that. I want everybody to listen to everything, but it is available if you want. This having issues section is if you've published your first post and you go look and you don't see the player. There's 4 different please try to fix answers here. You can try one, go clear your cache, look at it, and usually one of those will fix any theme conflicts and make the player show up. Save changes. And the play in new window section here, you can change the size of the window. It's 420 by 240, which is a pretty good size, but you can change that right here in this section. So I'm going to show you how to publish an episode now. So we can go back to the welcome screen and hit create new episode, or we can go new post, or we can go posts, add new. All of them go to the same place, but let's hit the create new episode, and it brings up a post editor. And in the post editor, it's just like any other blog post. You put a title of the episode in the title box. And yours may look a little different. There's a newer editor, block editor that that WordPress has, but it'll have basically the same layout as this, just looks a little different. I use the classic editor because I'm old school. But that right there, you want to put your title in there, and here you want to put at least a couple of paragraphs. Do not leave that blank in the main post content area. You should put at least a little bit about the episode that you're publishing. And then you come down here to the podcast episode box. Now, if you're hosting with Blueberry, you can upload it right here. If you're not hosting with Blueberry, you upload it to wherever you upload it and get a link that starts with HTTP or HTTPS and ends with .mp3, the whole link to the file wherever it is on the internet. And then paste that in here and hit verify. But if you're hosting with Blueberry, look how cool this is. Click choose file, and it's going to bring up a window here eventually. My internet's a little slow today. There we go. And you click upload new file, and it brings up an uploader. You can either select files or you can go drag and drop it. I'm just going to grab it right here and hit open, and it's going to upload. As it uploads, it gives you some Star Wars stuff. One of our developers is a Star Wars fan. And when it's done uploading, it will just close those 2 boxes, and you'll be left with the MP3 name right here in the media URL box. By the way, make your MP3 file names simple. Don't put a bunch of spaces in it. Spaces are not good. So you want letters, numbers, underscores, or dashes, and don't have an underscore at the beginning or the end, or a dash at the beginning or the end of the file name before the .mp3. The simpler, the better, really. I like to number them so that you don't accidentally upload the same file name twice, because it'll overwrite it on the server. So anyway, once you get that in there, either paste in your full link from another host or you've uploaded it to Blueberry, hit verify. And it's going to come up green with a big check mark here. Now, at this point, you can go into these other things here and add episodic images, all kinds of things you can go through, but you don't have to do any of it. That's what's nice about it. None of that is required. So then you can go up here and categorize it. Now, this category has nothing whatsoever to do with your podcast feed. This is just simply to categorize it on the website in case you want to organize your posts on WordPress. If you want to put in a featured image, you do that here. And the featured image is what would show up if you share this post permalink on a social media site. That's what the permalink does. But when you're happy with it, you got the green check mark, everything's uploaded, you hit publish. And as soon as this is done publishing, you are podcasting. Nobody knows about it yet, but you are podcasting. And to prove it, we're going to go back to the website, and you're going to see the first episode, Weaving Your First Basket. And there's my show notes. There's the player. There's the play a new window link, the download link that I talked about. Let's refresh this. And it's got your subscribe links here. Now, for some reason, Apple Podcasts came up, and I didn't show you how to do that, so I'm going to show you how to do that next. So we're going to go back to PowerPress, and just click on PowerPress. It brings you to the right place, and go to Destinations. And we have all these destinations that help you get on those different directories. And you can see that was in there. That's going to be blank. Okay? So what you're going to do is you're going to click How to Submit to Apple. So you click that. It brings you to this page. It reminds you what your feed is. And you can copy that if you want, but you probably won't need it. And it has all the requirements here. And you just click this right here, sign into iTunes Podcast Connect. And when you get there, it's going to come up with a login. That is your Apple ID. If you don't have an Apple ID, you need to go get an Apple ID first, and then you can submit. So that's my Apple ID. That's my password. A bunch of dots. It's not a very strong password, huh? So then you hit that. And it logs you into iTunes Connect, and it brings up a preview of your show. Now, if it doesn't bring up the preview and have this already filled in, then paste that feed address in there and click validate. But it sometimes, excuse me, had a sneeze there. But anyway, if it doesn't, you can put it in there, hit validate. It'll come up green, prepared for submission, or it will come up red and it'll give you some sort of error. But most of the time it comes up like this if you follow this video. Shows you your artwork, title, type episodic, that's what you want. Category that you're going to be in at Apple, the language, media is audio, explicit tags off, gives you the description, the copyright, and a link back to the website. If everything looks the way you want, including your first episode down here, you hit submit. And I'm not going to do that because I don't want this one in Apple Podcasts, but that'll get you on Apple Podcasts. And then when you're done, you'll get an email that says, hey, you're up for submission in the directory and all that. It's going to be 1 to 5 days, and it could be 1 day, could be 5, could be any time in between. They do that manually over at Apple, so the times vary, but usually it's about 5 business days. And you get another email saying, congratulations, you're in the Apple Podcast directory. They're going to send that email to that email address that you put in the feed settings for Apple, and they're going to send you a link. That link goes here. Also down here, some checkboxes. Show it in the subscribe sidebar widget. Show the link in the subscribe page, and also show the link under the media player. You can turn any of those on or off, and when you're happy with it, hit Save Changes. And then we'll go back to that post that we already have. There we go. And you'll see that Apple Podcast is there. If it's not there, you didn't put anything in that box, or you turned off the checkbox for under the player. But basically that brings it to, that link will bring them to Apple Podcasts. Android is on by default. RSS is on by default. And this more link is the subscribe page, also on the sidebar widget, and you can just drag that into any widget area. It's called Subscribe to Podcast. There's that same image there. But anyway, then there's more subscribe options. That's the same exact thing. That is your subscribe page, and you see this is the subscribe widget, and it has all these things in it. And some of these aren't populated yet. You have to do that in the destinations section for each of those things. So go back to destinations here, and for Google, it's a little bit different. Now this Google one shouldn't have been in there either, but you can click this, how to submit to Google, and basically it'll give you this link. Now this link may or may not work right away because Google is based on search. You can log into, and this is a hard address to say, so listen carefully. It's Google. No, what is it? I told you it's hard. It's podcasts with an S, podcastmanager.google.com. And you can go put your feed address in there and add that to Google. And in a few days, this link will work. But it gives you this link because this link will be the link that your listing at Google will be. And you paste that in the Google listing URL and hit Save Changes. And same thing, all of these have the same sort of thing. Stitcher, same thing. You can turn these links on and off. There's instructions on how to get into all those different places and all the way down the line. And that's how you get that distributed. So that should get you started on PowerPress 8.3. If this looks completely wrong, you're on an older version, so please update to PowerPress 8.3.